Mayor Jenny Durkan, who will kick us off with opening remarks, followed by Randy Engstrom, Director of the Office of Arts and Culture. After Randy, we will hear from Cassie Chinn, Deputy Executive Director of the Wing Luke Museum. And then we will hear from Vivian Phillips, the former Commissioner of Seattle Arts Commission, and then finally Tim Lennon, who is joining us from Langston Hughes. Is that correct? I'm seeing a nod. Okay, great, thank you. Sorry, I did not have my notes in front of me. Apologies to everyone here. As usual, we will have a Q&A at the end of our session today, and I will read in our press corps. If you would like to ask a question, please RSVP either in the chat or send me a note. And with that, we'll get started. Over to you, Mayor Jenny Durkan.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you everybody for being here on yet another virtual press conference. I have to say two things. One is, it is so great to be in 2020 here to announce something that is just pure joy and good news with people who have been so dedicated to our community, and we have a path forward to improving our community. And second, yesterday, seeing people get the first vaccines gave me hope. It will be a while before everyone in Seattle can get vaccinated, but it does show us that we will be able to return to our lives and our friends and our families and in-person press conferences sometime at the end of the year. Today, we're really excited to announce the creation of a new public development authority, first one in Seattle in over 40 years. And it's one of the ways our city pulls together to preserve or ensure those things that matter to the heart and soul of our city. We did it for the Pike Place Market, and today we're doing it to make sure that we can, as we come out of COVID, that we not only preserve, but we protect that part of our city that really is its soul, the arts and culture, and that we make sure that we do it in a way that can be more equitable, and that our recovery is one that actually does bridge the gap to prosperity for everyone. The combination of crises that we faced this year, from the pandemic to the economic downturn to the civil rights reckoning that we are still in the midst of, to wildfire smoke in the West Seattle Bridge, there are always challenges as before us. But unless we act with intention, we know that coming out of COVID-19, those disparities that were shown to be so very stark during this pandemic cannot be erased or changed unless we are very intentional with our actions. This cultural space PDA is one of the things we can do for better Seattle in the future. It is designed to combat the displacement and disparities we've seen by leveraging the city's investments and to help cultural communities, particularly communities of color, acquire and develop real estate in Seattle. We know that real estate and land acquisition are crucial to creating wealth, but also crucial to creating space. We have to act now to preserve that city's soul. For decades, we've been defined by our culture. So many great artists, both performing artists and visual artists, have come from Seattle or come to Seattle and created great art. We've seen some of the most iconic artists in America. But during COVID pandemic, we have seen how our community can be just pummeled. Not just by the pandemic and the economic crisis, but the civil rights reckoning coming from that, just challenging us to do better, to be the better city that we can be. And this cultural space agency will combat the effects of the pandemic and lead the way to an equitable recovery by developing cultural real estate projects in a way that reflect the needs and desires of community that have borne the burden of institutional racism. Building community wealth through investment opportunities in cultural real estate projects, and supporting arts and cultural organizations, small businesses, and community development. The Cultural Space Agency is also part of our broader work to build community wealth through transfers. Recently, we've transferred Bird Bar Place, the Central Area Senior Center, Fire Station 6 to community-based organizations. This PDA is in that same spirit, but just a different way. It will build to work to transfer properties to stop displacement and empower communities that have been impacted by systemic racism to really have access to the true pathways in Seattle. I want to congratulate Randy and his entire team at Arts particularly Matthew Richter, who has been working on this for so long. This is truly a great effort by Randy's whole team. So Randy, please thank everyone on my behalf. I also want to thank Cassie, Tim, and Vivian for joining us today, for championing Help This, but even more than that, for themselves, for their dedication to the arts and culture of this city in so many ways. Vivian has served in probably every role there is to move things forward. Tim is at one of the most important, iconic cultural places we have. And Wing Luke, Cassie is, as you know, I think one of the true treasures of Seattle. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for your commitment to the vision of Seattle. And thank you for your commitment to making sure that when we recover, we come back better. We come back stronger and more equitable, but we do it intentionally to actually preserve those places for arts and culture. And with that, I turn it over to Randy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Wow, in 8 years in this job, this has got to be one of the proudest moments that I think that we've had, or that I've had. You know, and this idea of a cultural space intermediary, a more active vehicle to create and foster affordability and community wealth building, that's been an idea since Matthew Richter walked into his first interview over 7 years ago. I can't overstate the opportunity that this organization has to stabilize, uplift, and expand our arts and cultural sector, especially our communities of color, which are some of the most talented innovators in our city. It was born out of the Cultural Space Program, which was launched in 2013. It is the first and only program of its kind in the United States, and the PDA builds on this legacy and is really the most advanced tool that's come out of this concept. The Cultural Space Program exists to preserve, create, and activate cultural square footage throughout the city of Seattle. We work with artists and arts organizations to strengthen their role in chartering the future of their creative spaces, and work with developers and builders to incorporate arts and culture into new projects. Ultimately, it's about creating a sense of agency or control over the future of cultural space in the fastest growing city in the United States. This is more important than ever as we continue to face the COVID pandemic, a deep economic recession, and a national reckoning around our country's racial crisis. As the mayor mentioned, the PDA will be an important tool for our city's economic recovery, and I look forward to seeing how we rebuild towards a more equitable future and more equitable city. There's a lot of people to thank, but I just got to give it up for Matthew Richter, for the mayor and Senior Deputy Mayor Fong, who believed in this project for these last 3.5 years. And for every staff member at the Office of Arts and Culture and every arts commissioner that touched this, every music commissioner that supported this, thank you. And there's no commissioner who has carried this project farther and contributed more to it than Cassie Chinn, the Deputy Executive Director of the Wing Luke Museum of the Asian Pacific American Experience, and a member of the Seattle Arts Commission, and most importantly, co-chair of the Facilities and Equitable Development Committee for about 100 years, while this project got incubated, developed, sculpted, formed, and now eventually brought into the world. Cassie, thank you so much, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you, Mayor Durkan, for this incredible moment and opportunity. I'm grateful to have been working with the staff at the Office of Arts and Culture, Matthew Richter, as well as the Arts Commission, Facilities and Equitable Development Committee on the cultural space and the PDA for over the last 5 years and more. It's hard to take in this moment after such a long journey, but being here with you all and seeing it come to fruition right now is incredibly rewarding and overwhelming. I say that because the PDA was created in conversation and partnership with our region's cultural communities over the course of many years. These community conversations were integral into creating the PDA as a values-based organization. And I wanted to share the foundation of the PDA in these values. There are 5. The first one is to keep race in the room, to center the needs of communities of color. Secondly, as Mayor Durkan mentioned, we want to build community wealth by creating structures that support the literal property ownership by community members and organizations. Thirdly, governance is incredibly key, and we wanted to make sure that we created transparent decision-making pathways where power flows from community to organizational leadership. We especially noted, and especially working with communities of color, that assets are not always financial. Our communities bring a wealth of intergenerational knowledge, sweat equity, cultural traditions, social networks, and other non-financial assets that are found in community. We want to lift those up as well. And then it's important, finally, in this journey to always be learning. We need to question dominant cultural assumptions and be inquisitive, open, and humble in this pursuit. As mentioned, this moment has been years in the making. Its supporting structure is a community-informed process that has built a hyper-local sensitivity to community needs. That said, we're able to create this right in the moment that it is most needed. It will move this work around cultural space, equitable development, and community engagement into its next phase. We each contribute to advancing equity in the moments and opportunities we're given, and I am grateful to helping steward this work. And now it is my pleasure to introduce my fellow charter signatory, also just longtime advocate and leader within cultural space and communities of color within Seattle, Tim Lennon.
Thank you so much, Cassie. I'm Tim Lennon, Executive Director of LANGSTON, where we cultivate Black brilliance in the heart of Seattle's Black Central District. I got involved in the PDA because I believe that this city should be as much a part of the solution to reversing gentrification and the predictability of who benefits and who loses out, as it has been in the past, to contributing to those circumstances. This PDA is about creating community wealth building opportunities where both community-based organizations, small businesses, and individuals in community can own shares of properties. We can scale this from block to neighborhood to district to region, and really ensure that our artists and our culture workers can remain here for the long haul. I propose this charter because I care about Black, Indigenous, POC communities, culture workers, artists, and cultural businesses. I want to see them thrive in the city that I call home, and I want us to grow together. On that note, I really want to just kick it off to a real Seattle icon, certainly someone whose shoulders I've stood on for as long as I've been working in the arts in this town, and just a beautiful friend, Miss Vivian Phillips.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Randy, Cassie. I have to start off by saying that even though I'm no longer on the Seattle Arts Commission, one of the things that I will carry with me forever is Randy's encouragement to think about what we can do and to move beyond whatever barriers there are. So I just want to say thank you to you, Randy, for that constant encouragement. I'm really grateful to all of you, and particularly Matthew as well, for carrying us through this and showing us the way. I am a product of Seattle Central area. I grew up here. I live here right now. And one of the things that I learned as a young person growing up, watching my mother, who was a community advocate, and her colleague and friend. So the two women, Dolores Bradley and Delphia Phillips, were the co-founders of one of Seattle's earliest community councils, the Judkins Rejected Community Council. And what they fought for was to stop the plan to choke off the Seattle Central area from the I-90 expansion. There was no plan for an exit into the Central area. Well, what I learned from that and from the results of their work is that you need to always be in the driver's seat, that there's never a time when people can pull you out of control unless you allow them to. And so what the Cultural Space Agency means to me and means to the community, I believe, is that our stewardship puts us back in the driver's seat. It allows us to return the vitality and the culture and the beauty that nurtures absolutely every part of this city with our stewardship. So I'm just so excited that we are now moving from concept and idea to policy. And while policy has not always been equally distributed, particularly among African Americans, I'm confident that this policy will again put us in the driver's seat, excuse me, and help us to sustain over a long period of time. The Cultural Space Agency is something that trusts the wisdom and the lived experience of Seattle's cultural communities who have built this city and who have invented its value out of their own creativity, their passion, and their labor. And the Cultural Space Agency seeks to return some of that value to the communities from which it has been stripped. It's a proposed solution, and I think it will be a solid solution to the disproportionate, racist, and exploitive growth that has driven this city for more than a century. It's an investment in our city's continued cultural relevance and a shared celebration of our cultural richness, and it directs resources that come along with actually solidifying and illustrating value. So we're really, really pleased to have this day be here in 2020. Who would have thought that we'd have good news like this in 2020 as well? So thank you all, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, everybody, for your wonderful words this morning. Mayor Durkan, would you like to say anything else before we start Q&A?
No, I think that's just, you see here this morning why this is so important and what the vitality this means for our city. So I did hear comments in recent weeks with people saying, you know, is this the kind of thing that you should be focused on? We've got to do this for the pandemic. We have to do this. This is exactly the right time to be doing this. This is when we're building for the future of Seattle. And we have lost so much, as Vivian has noted. This is the time for us to double down on our values, and this is one of those investments. So I couldn't be more thrilled to be here.
Wonderful. So this morning, we have one question so far RSVP'd. If you would like to ask a question, please drop a note in the chat and we'll try to get you in. But first and certainly one of our regulars, we'll turn it over to Amari Salisbury from Converge Media. Amari, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning. First of all, I want to say this is great news in 2020. Very happy to hear it. Second of all, I want to acknowledge the hard work of Mr. Randy Engstrom and the time and commitment that he's put in arts and culture. We're going to definitely miss Randy. I have a question here, maybe directed for Mayor Durkan as well as Tim Lemon. So we have this cultural space agency, and I've heard everybody kind of talk about it in its larger sense, but like on an everyday scale. You know, how do I translate what I just heard here to people in the neighborhood? What is this going to look like? What is a structure or a project around this going to look like? Is it, you know, transferring some an existing building and repurposing it? Is it getting some land and building a structure? Can you drill down just a little bit? I know you don't have the exact schematics and details, but maybe you can just put a little bit more skin on the bones.
Yeah, I'm going to let Tim and Cassie go first because they've been working on this, and Vivian. And then I'll follow with it from the city's point of view. But this is community grown, and I think we need to hear the community voice first.
Bert, I'll go ahead and jump in a little bit. Omar, I appreciate the question and always appreciate the work that you do over at Converge. You know, I think basically what we're looking at is, to answer your question directly, it's a little bit of all the above. You know, the structure of a public development authority allows entity to take transfers of property from the city, from the state, from the county, but it also allows the organization to raise funds from private investors, from, you know, philanthropy, to acquire properties outright. And so what we're looking at in terms of the structure of the organization is a community-based council that can evaluate opportunities, work with folks who are already on the ground in community, have projects in mind, or have space needs. You know, there's so many of us who are struggling just to keep roofs over our organizations, to keep our cultural businesses going. This is both nonprofits and for-profit enterprises that have a cultural bent. And so the vision is for everybody who's already doing the work on the ground to get together to work with this new organization to identify opportunities to secure property, to retain property, to expand, to partner with other organizations doing similar work or with complementary space needs, and really advance the larger goals of the community through meeting their space needs.
This is Cassie. I would just add and want to give appreciation to the Build Art Space Equitably cohort or BASE cohort. We're starting our third year. So cumulatively includes probably over 70 artists, arts and cultural organizations rooted in Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. They've been diving into both issues related to keeping and creating cultural space within our communities, as well as surfacing all these opportunities. And they'll form the constituency base for the PDA to really help surface all of the opportunities and the ideas that Tim mentioned as potential programs and property investments for the PDA, anywhere ranging from temporary pop-ups, which we know have been really exciting to see within our city to activate space, all the way through the spectrum of development to, say, quarter block development. So there's a whole range of opportunity. Really excited to use community expertise to be able to help direct the activities of the PDA.
Omari, if I could just add just a couple of points. I think the thing for me is the focus on the last word in this, public development authority. And it's the authority that this cultural space agency has to be self-determined as it relates to how the cultural spaces in our community are managed, secured, and cared for. And I think if we think about other public development authorities like Pike Market, and there's also Pacific Tower is a public development authority. There is SCIPTA in the International District that is a public development authority. It is exactly what we've needed to be self-guided and self-directed. But with authority also becomes responsibility. And I think that those two things are most important. PDAs allow us to extend resources as we see fit. And I think that's the biggest piece for me around why this is important.
And Omari, I'll just add to that. I think you've heard me say it before, mayors come and go. And we know that's even more true this week. And what we have to have, if you want to replace systems that are inherently inequitable or racist, you have to replace it with systems that are durable and equitable. And as long as this is just in the task force and thinking phase, as these people have been working on for so long, it doesn't give the durability. But when you create a PDA, it creates that authority, just as Vivian says, and that outlasts whoever the mayors or council members may be. It is something that we've decided we want to make it a permanent feature of our city and our values. And I think for the everyday person that you asked about, I think Tim said it well, it will be all of the above. It will be supporting the artists themselves. It will be creating shared spaces. And most importantly, I think it will make sure that we have actual real estate devoted to this in community hands for the future of our city. We grew way too fast and way too many people have been displaced from Seattle. Seattle became a place of the most affluent and greater and greater disparities. COVID put a quick break on everything. Now, as we're moving forward, we have opportunities on every front to think about how do we make sure that in this next stages of growth and recovery, that we're doing it in a way that actually advances equity and makes sure that our communities of color, particularly our Black community in the Central District, have a home and place in Seattle for their families and for their cultural spaces.
Thank you, Mayor. And Omari, well, first, thank you for the kind words and again for the work that you do. To put a couple of really specific examples of projects in real time in the city that we're thinking about, one thing I would offer is the Equitable Development Initiative, which is one of the standout programs I've had the privilege of engaging with in my career, funds a number of projects, both in capital and capacity building each year. the PDA could be a partner to helping one or more of them actually put together the real estate deal necessary to bring their projects to fruition. Another example is that our Office of Housing does incredible work, and there are dozens of projects in the pipeline, all of which are going to have ground floors of commercial space who the end user is yet unknown. Could the PDA come in and purchase those ground floor units and then make available either long-term affordable or condo for ownership opportunities for local businesses and cultural institutions, and create either long-term stability or long-term ownership capacity for locally owned small businesses? And another is, we have cities or buildings that the city owns, and we could be talking about transfer of those properties, large and small. We could also be talking about long-term leasing of those spaces, like the second floor of King Street Station below the office that we just cut the ribbon on last year, where we could bring together a number of organizations with a common mission to meet a community need by the PDA master leasing that floor and being able to allow community organizations long-term stability and rent control in a space like that. So those are a few tangible examples of where we think the PDA can solve problems or seize opportunities that exist right now in the city.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you, everyone, for your words on this. Omari, do you have a follow-up?
I would just like to say, it's just more of a statement real quick to throw in here. I would like to say that I think that it's good that the city is moving in this direction, as Converge is comprised mostly of artists that are either out of work, displaced, and things like that. So this is definitely good news coming out of the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And not seeing any additional questions or hands raised in the audience, that concludes our Q&A portion of today's press conference. Mayor or anyone else who's joining us today, would you like to say some closing words?
I think my closing words are also thanks to Randy. It is bittersweet to see him leave the city. We can't wait to see the next chapter, and we know he's not going away, but his commitment to the arts, culture, and equity in the city is not surpassed by anyone. And so I just want to thank you, Randy, for all your energy, for making sure you're empowering community every step of the way. Every conversation we have starts at that base level. So we're going to miss you as a city employee. I see maybe 3 people on the screen that might be the next you. But thanks for all your work. We really, don't you be turning around, Tim. Okay, Vivian, I see you there. So thanks for all your work, and thanks for all the years of labor that it took to get here. When you hear it described, it's almost like giving birth to a teenager. And here we go.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for joining us today. That concludes today's press conference.